Alrighty, take 3. We will figure this out. I apologize for sending a ton of invites again. Alright, here's hope. It says adding, so that is a good thing. I hope. Hello, Kelsey. I hope you're doing good today.
Okay.
It worked!
It worked! Yay!
Oh my goodness. I have no idea what in the world happened. It was definitely on my end, though. Like, for whatever reason, it just was not wanting to work on my end.
Well, we have it now.
We've got it figured out. And I cannot wait to dive right in. The other live stream, I had just announced the contest that I'm doing. And that live stream, after I went out, I accidentally hit delete instead of save. So I have to announce the contest again. For those of you out there who are creative-minded people, we have a very cool contest in store for you where you can write a 2-page scene, and the winner will have that scene put in the movie. And I'm super excited because whenever I was a kid and I started writing, I wanted to do something like that so bad but never had the opportunity. So now I am giving the opportunity. Alrighty, so I guess we can dive right in. I am having a hard time hearing though, so if you said anything in the past few seconds, I definitely didn't hear it.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
I can hear you now. Alright, so before we get into the movie talk, I've shared a little bit about it on Facebook, right? And I truthfully cannot share it enough because it's such a good movie. For those of you who have not seen, hello, Selena. For those of you who have not seen the post about it, there's a movie called Chasing Rabbits that was released last year, I believe. And Holly was in Chasing Rabbits, and it is such a good movie. Like, I've watched it 3 or 4 times right now, and it's one of those that, like, the more you watch it, the more information you get. And so I'm curious to hear more about the movie and your role as Jane, and especially because I know that some of the people watching haven't seen it. So fire away with anything you want to tell us about the movie and about your role in the movie.
Yeah, well, first, thank you so much for watching and for recommending it to everyone. So Chasing Rabbits is best described as a dramedy. It's kind of has some thriller aspect to it. It's about a woman who, when she's a child, her mother joins a cult, and then is now a grown woman, and her dad goes missing, and she suspects that maybe the cult kidnapped her. So it's following kind of her adventure in trying to find her dad. My character is Jane, so I am the best friend of the lead character. I would say Jane is no nonsense, says what comes to her mind, tells it like it is type of person, and is the kind of.
Oh, you cut out a little bit. Your video and audio is paused for some reason. Everyone, give us just a... Oh, there you are. You're kind of coming back a little bit. You paused for a few seconds. Is Holly's feed buffering for everyone else, or is it just me? Oh, I heard you there.
I'm so sorry. Is it working?
Oh no, you're... Yeah, I can hear you now. It paused for probably about a minute.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's fine. It happens.
Yeah. It's so much fun for her. Eric really directed the movie. It was his first film he directed. It was just the entire cast was a blast to be with as well. So it was a great experience. Did it cut out again on me?
A little bit. It kind of sounded slightly like a robot talking at parts.
I'm so sorry.
It happens. It's fine. I don't know how much of what you just said was audible to the viewers. So everybody, if you could let us know, that way we can kind of go back and go over everything that was not audible. I know, like, for parts on my end at least, it cut out. But I heard a lot about what you said about the plot and whatnot and the character.
Yeah, just the last bit of what I said. So Chasing Rabbits, it was directed by Eric Pasquarelli. It was his first film that he directed, and he was absolutely incredible. So
You would never guess that was his first.
He's awesome. And he's so funny and just one of the coolest guys that you'll ever meet. So it was great working with him. And then the entire cast was incredible. We had a really small crew. Eric did all the camera stuff. Mitchell Jackie was the producer, and Liz Cutshaw did all of the audio, and that was pretty much it. We had some PAs, like Jake Atwood was a PA one day, but for the most part, it was those three people and the cast, and we did the whole thing with kind of a skeleton crew, but it was great.
The same thing is definitely going to apply to The First Harvest. So for the scenes that I'm not in, I'm going to be behind the camera, at least one of the people behind the camera. There's also going to be a second camera person, then a boom operator, and that's pretty much going to be it as far as the behind the scenes crew goes. And of course, like for myself, whenever I'm on screen, my buddy Matthew, who's wanting to get into film, is going to be manning the camera. And I know, like, he's super excited because this is his first movie. It's my first movie too, technically. But a large part of why I'm going into this project is to elevate everybody else who is part of it. I actually have a very special surprise that I'm not telling anybody about because it may not happen, but it is currently in the works, and there have been some steps taken. And if this person is added to the cast, it will elevate absolutely everybody involved in the project. And so I really cannot wait for that. And if it happens, it's not going to be announced until the trailer. So it's going to be kind of I guess, a teaser even for the cast. And that's the most I've said about it. So, but yeah, so as far as Chasing Rabbits goes, what was it like to kind of get into that character? How much of yourself was in the Jane character?
So, at least for me, I feel like Jane was kind of maybe easier to get into than some other characters, just because even though I'm not 100% like Jane, I feel like she is much bolder probably than I am in my real life. I feel like everyone has known a Jane. Everyone has that friend who, you never know what's going to come out of their mouth. You never know what they're going to say, but they're always 100% authentic, 100% themselves. So for me, it was just, reading the script several times through, trying to see, what's actually in the lines and maybe what's not being said. And just kind of taking that approach, trying to really understand, what's going on. What's this relationship like with Jane and the lead character, Penny? But for me, I really enjoyed becoming Jane because I think we all want to be more like her sometimes, where we just tell it how it is.
For me, I really enjoyed the comedy behind Jane's character, or the character of Jane, rather. Like, especially the Twitter line where she said 90s cults really missed out on Twitter. I literally died laughing. It was probably 4 a.m. at my group home, and I laughed so loud that I woke 2 out of my 3 clients up. It just, I don't know why, it just caught me completely off guard. And there are a few other lines in the movie I'm not going to say because I want everyone to go and watch the movie for themselves, which you can do on HoosierFilms.com. I think it's like $10 to buy, and it is so worth it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the recommendation, and I hope everyone can go watch it. And if you have, you can always reach out to me if you want to know anything else about the movie or how we made it or about my character. I'm happy to talk about it.
Absolutely. And I know we've got someone on the live stream. I don't know if she's going to chime in quite yet, but I know that she has questions about acting. So at any point, if anyone wants to ask any questions about the movies, whether it's the movie we're working on or the short series or acting in general or horror in general, definitely comment at any time and we'll answer. Can you see the comments as well, or is that just on my end?
I can see the comments.
Okay, good. So kind of going forward and keeping the Chasing Rabbits theme at the same time, there is actually a kind of an Easter egg in one of the episodes of the short series where the movie is referenced indirectly. And I actually wrote that scene like 5 days ago. And I was thinking about a way to connect like various projects that the various actors involved have been in. And I thought that that was kind of a fun Easter egg to throw in. And then in the movie itself, there's also Easter eggs to other franchises such as Scream, Sleepaway Camp. There's a couple of Friday the 13th Easter eggs because that's one of my favorites. But going into the horror part of the conversation, I watched or rather listened to the podcast that you recently did, and I know you had mentioned to me that you're a big fan of horror, but hearing you talk about it, it was like, holy crap, she's actually really into horror. So what are some of your favorite horror franchises?
Okay. So I really like Halloween, and big fan. And I'm in an acting class, and it's really funny because we don't often talk about horror in the class, but Halloween is one that he is assigned as a viewing assignment for everyone in the class with us. But I love Halloween. I love Saw. The Scream movies are great. Yeah, if we're just talking about, franchises, ones that just span time with so many different movies, those are the ones that come to mind immediately. And then standalone films, I have, oh gosh, just so many, dozens and dozens that I could go on and on about. But yeah.
It looks like we have our first question of the evening. Selena asks, what tips do you have for memorizing lines? How do you tap into emotions such as crying or transforming into another personality for that character?
So for me, with lines, and really anytime I get a script, what I try to do first is just read through it several times flat. So assigning no sort of emotion to it, trying not to jump to conclusions about how the characters are supposed to be feeling. Because a lot of times when you do that, when you do the flat reading, then it becomes clear what's in the lines and what's actually not being said, but the subtext. And then once you understand that, when you understand the emotion and the feeling of the scene, then the dialogue usually makes a lot more sense, and then it becomes more intuitive. So I would just say read through it flat several times, and then just become in tune with what the meaning of the scene is, and that's going to make the dialogue itself stick in your mind. So far as emotions, one thing, and it's something that I talk about a lot in the classes that I take, but a lot of times you can access emotions through physicality. So if you have a scene that you're supposed to be very emotional in, if it's something that involves crying, what I try to do is kind of put myself in that physical state. Okay, when I'm really sad, what does my body do naturally? And then when you change those physical aspects, at least for me, I find that the rest of the emotion kind of falls into place. Everybody's a little bit different. Some people just have really good emotional memory. Some people think of specific events in their lives that they attach certain feelings to, and that's enough. Another thing that I do is if I have a character or a scene that I know is going to be really emotionally draining, I have made entire playlists for that character and that scene. And it may not work for everyone, but for me, I mean, music really helps me tap into emotions as well. So listening to that can get me into the place mentally and emotionally that I need to be.
I concur with everything that Holly just said. Especially, repeating the lines and going over it multiple times. That's actually an old trick that I used whenever I was studying the Bible. Ironically, if I wanted to memorize a passage of scripture, I would go over it probably 100 to 150 times And by the time that I had done that, I had memorized that, whatever it was I was trying to memorize. Nowadays, for myself, it's definitely a lot trickier because of how many concussions I've had. So a lot of times I do have to kind of improvise, but whenever it comes to memorizing anything, going over it multiple times is a very good way to do it. And then for myself, like, I've never been a character that I didn't write, so I feel like I'm not as qualified to answer that. But yeah, I concur with everything Holly said.
And another thing for lines as well, if you're more of if you do better hearing things rather than reading them over and over again, Scene Study is an app you can download on your phone, and you can record lines for every character, entire scenes, and then you can choose to play back and rehearse it being a certain character. So it'll feed you the lines of the other characters, and then it will have a blank amount of space for you to say your line. And that's a really good way to do it too.
And what was that again?
It's called Scene Study.
I'm going to put that in the comments. That way people can go back and look at it. All right, and then Rachel asks, how can a teen get into acting? Do you have any tips?
Yeah, and I don't know. Are you based in Indiana? Is it Rachel? I'm sorry, I didn't see the name.
Yes.
Okay.
I've known her parents literally since I was a kid.
Okay.
So that's actually who I messaged you about too. So yes, they are here in Indiana.
Okay, so if you can take classes are a really great way to get a better understanding of what's actually going on when we act, what it's all about, how we can become better storytellers. So if you can take classes are great. Some places have local classes or local workshops, especially geared toward teenagers. I personally take some online classes from Jim Doherty, who's absolutely amazing. He's been on episodes of like House of Cards, and like he's been in all sorts of movies. He's amazing. If that's not a possibility for you, a good idea might be to join, if you have Facebook, Indiana Filmmakers Network is a really, really great resource. Keep your eye out for casting calls. Just be careful in doing that. I would, most people tend to be great, but you always have to be a little bit careful. Just keep an eye out on things. If it seems suspicious, if it seems fishy, talk to other people. Don't put yourself in a situation that would allow somebody else to take advantage of your desire to become an actress. But most people on Indiana Network are really awesome. It's a very supportive community. And keep an eye out for things like student films. If you live near a university, that might be a really good option to get experience. They're typically unpaid, but it will be your chance to get in front of a camera, to become a character, and to start getting footage for eventually having a demo reel. Do we have a pup?
Yeah, he started coming this way, but he stopped.
Oh.
He'll make an appearance. Anytime I do a video call or live stream, they get their 5 minutes of fame in. Here he is.
Oh, so cute.
I actually have 2 dogs, and they are brothers. They are so opposite of each other, though. This here is Stimpy, and yes, his brother is Ren. But Stimpy here, he is kind of a little bit taller than Ren, and he has short hair, whereas Ren is smaller than Stimpy and has long hair. So it's so funny. You would never guess they were brothers. Ren is still trying to get me to play fetch, so he might not make an appearance for a little bit. But yes, acting classes are great, and if they're not accessible for one reason or another, it's always good to study as much as you can, rather it's video tutorials online, or one thing that I like to do, especially in preparing for the role of Jay Sullivan in The First Harvest and in the short series as well, is I watch, there you go, Stimper. I watch my personal favorite actors who have played similar roles. Specifically, I'm a huge fan of Willem Dafoe, and so I've been watching the Spider-Man movies that he's in, because the Green Goblin character, in a way, is very similar to the character of the Harvester. So that's one thing I've done. Obviously, if you're doing a role that is not horror or comic related, I wouldn't study the Green Goblin, but nevertheless, that's one thing I do, because I've not yet been able to actually join an acting class. So I've kind of made my own in a way.
And I think we can learn so much. I mean, the greats are great for a reason, and watching classic film or modern classics and seeing micro expressions, how you can
Yes.
create so much with very little movement of the face. There's so much to learn by watching the great performers of our time and from before us.
Absolutely, and kind of going along with the Willem Dafoe, or the connection to Willem Dafoe, micro expressions are definitely they're something I study for fun, especially, like I said, in preparation for this role, studying guys like Willem Dafoe, Joaquin Phoenix. In the movie No Way Home, there's a scene where the Green Goblin is choking out Spider-Man, right? And Willem Dafoe's expressions during that scene, I'm so glad that they took away his mask in No Way Home, because don't get me wrong, his voice is absolutely incredible as the Green Goblin, but to see the actor's facial expression makes it so much better. And especially during that scene, and in the climax of No Way Home, whenever him and Peter are having that last fight, micro expressions are definitely something that everybody should study, even if you're not in acting, in my opinion. We have Pat C. Thomas, who says, love acting, love memorizing Bible verses, and love dogs. This is awesome. Thank you very much. I hope it's okay I said your name on the live stream. I didn't think to ask before saying that, but nevertheless, yes, this is absolutely incredible to be doing this, and I love that we've been able to kind of dive right in with a few questions too. So by all means, guys, keep the questions coming. So going forward, right now we are working on season 2 of Paul's Wonderful Circus, which is ironically the only actual prequel to The First Harvest. I had done a short series before and a short film, but I've made a lot of changes that make those connections a lot more, what's the word? They kind of weaken the connection, so it's almost kind of a new series in a way. But season 2 is absolutely insane. We have a chase scene, we have a kill scene, we have a guy that's going to get relatively bloodied up, which I'm a fan of slasher films, so actually doing a scene like that is almost a dream come true, which is probably a weird dream to have, but nevertheless, I cannot wait to get season 2 out to the public, and it will be available for viewing both on YouTube and Facebook. I'm probably going to put it on Facebook first because I get a lot more interaction on Facebook. Stimpy jumped back up here. So I cannot wait. And like I said, I can't remember if it was this live stream or the first one we tried out. Holly is playing the character of Emily, and I cannot wait to work with you on the short series and in the movie as well. So I know that you're one of the few people I actually sent the full script to, the way it's going to play out on the screen. I have sent out some fake scenes as well, just to kind of keep people guessing. But in terms of like the script and the Emily character, I'm kind of curious, just for my own sake, I guess. What drew you specifically to the Emily character?
For me, I just find her really interesting. And without spoiling anything, there's a lot of internal conflict going on here.
Mm-hmm.
It's having feelings for someone who I'm trying to think of what I can say without spoiling.
I will say minor spoilers are okay.
Okay.
Not anything big, but small small spoilers are okay.
Yeah. I mean, here's someone who has terrible changes in someone she loves, and she has to reconcile that as for him knowing what he is now. And, you know, I feel like people experience this in their day-to-day life, not to this level, not with as serious of changes as what the characters in the first Harvest are going through. But you know, a lot of times in life as people, we love people, and we can't accept what they've become, I guess. I don't know. It's very interesting. There's a lot of internal conflict in here, and that's really what draws me to the role, because it's a challenge. And any time that you are challenged in acting, that's really, really exciting. Because, you know, you may go in having your thoughts about the character, but they're going to develop and they're going to change, and they're going to push you to do something you haven't done before. And that's really exciting.
Absolutely. And to kind of further elaborate on the specific, the connections. So the Emily character is the ex-wife of the serial killer in the movie. And so as far as he knows, she is off the grid. And obviously both of them being in the movie, there is going to be that face-to-face moment. I'm definitely not spoiling that. But it is going to be a very raw and emotional movie. And I think what I've tried to do at least is make it real, make it realistic. You know, this is something that can happen. It does happen, and it has happened. You know, people become absolute monsters every day. And one thing I set out to do was create a movie that wasn't solely reliant on like paranormal stuff. There might be some hints of it, not spoiling that part, but you know, I feel personally like a lot of horror movies today do have the paranormal element, which is great. Like, I'm all for that. But in terms of me making my first movie, I wanted to do something that, I mean, obviously it's been done before, but it hasn't been done in a while. And so I want to kind of shift the focus back towards the realism and the reality that people can become monsters. And so, like, for myself, portraying the Jay Sullivan character, it's the complete opposite of who I am, but it's something that I've personally gone through and seen unfold. And so for myself, to be able to kind of bring that to life on the screen is going to be so cool. And it's weird because I've shot, like, for the the short series, I've already shot a few scenes. And seeing myself on screen is so weird. It's so different. Just side note for those who are going to get into acting soon or who are just getting in, it's different. And so for myself, like, I almost didn't put myself in the role because I didn't want to make the movie about me. But it's definitely a challenge. Like you said with the Emily character, it's a challenge for me to get into a role that is the complete opposite of me. I'm not, like, I'm very quiet. I'm not outspoken. And so it's going to be fun to play such a role. I have totally missed a few comments. Oh my goodness. Rachel asks, or says rather, I do a lot of writing and I've made tons of characters before. I have one that I love the most. I practice being her sometimes and think what she would do in some situations. Is that kind of helpful to do?
Yeah, I mean, I would say any opportunity you have to explore emotion, explore thoughts, explore something other than yourself. Anytime you can work your way through human emotion, relationships, how we interact, that goes so far. It helps us understand what we're doing as actors. So I say absolutely. And also, when you're new to acting, creating your own content, that's a good idea. If you can get a setup where you have decent lighting and sound, and you have this character in mind, you've written a script of things they might say, get in front of that good setup, tape it, and then you might have a monologue for an audition ready to go, or ready to upload if you get like a backstage account or an actor's access account. So I say absolutely. I don't know, Paul has anything to add to that?
Actually, that's how I made season 1. I literally, I sat in a dark room with my camera and I just filmed. I filmed the absolute most nonsensical stuff that I could think of to say. Most of it was improvised on the spot. Some of it I did write out. But I always recommend doing that because whether you use it for like an audition tape or whether you use it just purely for your own, just your own practice or whatever, it's so fun to do. And it does help quite a bit. For myself, I have actually done that with other characters, as opposed to just simply the Jay Sullivan character. I've not put any of that out though, and some of it I definitely won't because it's terrible. But that's part of it, is learning and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work. That's really the only thing I can think to add to that. I always recommend self-taping any kind of monologue because that will help you a lot, and then that will kind of give you a feel too of like your how you're reacting with the micro expressions and how you sound. So it's always a very good thing to do, in my opinion. Selena says she has to see the first season. I can send that to you. There is a playlist on YouTube that has the first short film and then all 6 episodes of season 1. Part of the issue with season 1 is that I didn't plan on it being a series. So in the first episode, I said my actual name instead of the character name. And then whenever I actually put it up as the series, I forgot to go back and change that. So again, that's part of the continuity change going forward into season 2 and the first harvest. The character name is not my actual name. Selena also asks, what made you guys want to be into acting, or I'm sorry, I misread that. What made you guys want to be in the acting or filmmaking industry? Who are your inspirations? I'm going to let you answer this first.
Okay. So for me, I have always considered myself to be really creative. But what it boils down to for me is storytelling. If you like telling stories, you can write, you can be an actor, a photographer, a musician. I enjoy both writing and acting. But there is something so rewarding about just investing everything you have into a character and trying to think the thoughts that character's having, feel the emotions they're having, and taking a step back from yourself for a while. So for me, it was just the creativity of it all and getting to tell stories to people. So far as inspiration, oh my goodness. So there are some actresses who I'm completely obsessed with right now. Saoirse Ronan is amazing. Florence
Yes.
Pugh is amazing. Frances McDormand. Those are like my top three that I love seeing everything that they do because it is just so authentic, and I feel like they could pull off any role that you put in front of them because their craft is there. They've invested so much time and energy into perfecting the craft, and just any you see them perform, it for me, I'm 100% blown away.
Absolutely. Saoirse Ronan is so good. The first movie of hers I saw was The Lovely Bones, and that movie, everything about it was just absolutely on point. That made me feel just about every emotion you can feel. Happiness, anger, sadness. There were parts of it that just absolutely ticked me off, and those are the parts that, it was supposed to do that. And so everything about it was so good and on point. The acting was phenomenal. The ending kind of surprised me. I typically can figure out what the ending is going to be about halfway through a movie. I didn't see it coming at all. So The Lovely Bones is really good. As far as myself getting into acting, I, like you, I grew up kind of creative. I loved to draw and paint, and I started writing at a very early age. People kind of look at me funny whenever I say I've been writing for 20 years, considering I'm only 23. But that's literally the truth. I started writing pretty much as soon as I knew what writing was, and I have not stopped. And so it's been a dream of mine to go into filmmaking specifically. I never actually pictured myself as an actor because growing up I always felt like that, kind of showcasing myself I was never good at. And so I didn't ever see myself going into acting specifically until I did the short film. And that was whenever I was like, okay, I was way too hard on myself. So that could actually be some advice for some of you out there watching this. Don't be too hard on yourself. If you feel like that you're not good enough to do something, do it anyway, because that's the way you get good at it. But anyway, so that's kind of why I got into filmmaking was I wanted to see the stories I created come to life. And, kind of going into the audition process for the first Harvest, even though it hasn't quite come to life just yet, seeing the audition tapes that I got, oh my goodness, it was mind-blowing. And especially like with you in the Emily character, because I didn't know initially how to actually bring Emily into the fold, because I knew I wanted to after the short film, but I wanted to make it in such a way that it was a critical role, especially going forward, to make it a franchise. Not to spoil too much about the first Harvest. As far as my direct influences, Willem Dafoe, like I said earlier, Joaquin Phoenix, specifically his role as the Joker. But again, he's one of those guys that he can pull off just about any role. Like, how many people do you know that can say they played Johnny Cash and the Joker? I mean, come on. And then he was in another movie that's not quite as well known. And truth be told, I cannot think of the name of it off the top of my head. which is kind of ironic. But basically, he plays a character that falls in love with an AI system. And so I'm a fan of his work because of how diverse he is. So Willem Dafoe, Joaquin Phoenix, kind of going back into vintage horror. I'm a huge fan of Boris Karloff. Not that he's a direct influence necessarily, but Anthony Hopkins, one of my favorites. Silence of the Lambs. There are some teasers in the first Harvest about Silence of the Lambs. Minor teasers compared to the other ones. But Anthony Hopkins, Jeffrey Dean Morgan as well, to kind of go more into modern-ish acting. He was in a movie actually that was, it came out very recently. I think it was called The Unholy. And I don't know, have you seen that, Holly?
I've missed that one. No.
Oh my gosh. I don't typically go for like really paranormal, like almost kind of demonic films in a way. But the way that they did it was very tasteful, in my opinion at least, and it was really good. His character is one that I studied specifically from that movie, preparing for the Jay Sullivan part of my role. Because the Jay Sullivan role, for those who have not yet seen the teasers, so Jay Sullivan is himself, but he also has the Harvester persona. So it's almost two different roles, in a way. But yeah, those are probably my biggest influences. Willem Dafoe, Joaquin Phoenix, Anthony Hopkins, Jeffrey Dean Morgan-ish. Austin Casey says, "What's up? What's up, brother?
Hey.
Missed you at the last wrestling show, bro. You missed an eventful night." So kind of more questions about horror, I guess. I know you said that you were into the Saw franchise. I'm actually working on the sequel to The First Harvest at the moment. There are some Saw references in The First Harvest, but it's going to get so much more intense going forward. There are some things that I'll say now and some things that I will not, obviously, until the sequel is actually ready for production. But there is a certain character in The First Harvest that they're not going to be used as much, but they're going to be set up for a more critical role in the sequel, which will see them almost as a form of Saw in a way. That's all that I'll say on that, because too much more will give away too much. But Saw is a very, very direct influence on the sequel and parts of The First Harvest. Out of curiosity, which of the Saw movies is your personal favorite?
Okay, so for me, I did not start watching them in order. I started with the second one. And then I went back and watched the first and then the second again and went on. So for me, the second one has a very special place in my heart. And so it's probably my favorite because it was my introduction to it. And Jigsaw is so fascinating to me, right? Sometimes it bothers me when I'm looking at the horror genre and we see the villains who aren't very well developed, Okay, they're doing these things, what's their motivation? It's totally fine if it's a slow reveal and we learn more about the villains as the franchise progresses. But for me, what makes Saw so fascinating is I feel like I understand Jigsaw and how he operates and why he operates and does the things that he does. So for me, Saw 2 has a special place in my heart because that was where I started. Again, not in order. So when I went back and watched the first one, I was like, wow, the ending. Oh my goodness. I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it. But that's where I stand on it.
Saw 2 is really good. I can't remember which one was my first movie, because believe it or not, my mother got me into horror whenever I was a kid. The first horror movie that I remember watching is Friday the 13th. And I saw that probably before I was even 10. And then, of course, I went into like Sleepaway Camp, and then, ironically, the Saw franchise. I'm 90% certain that the first Saw movie I saw was the original, and truthfully, I probably shouldn't have whenever I was a kid, but it was so fascinating. And then the twist ending, oh my gosh. It's really cool to watch as an adult, but as a kid, oh my gosh, it was just beyond. And so I definitely remember that. So I'm going to go with that was my first one. Of the original trilogy, my personal favorite is probably the third, because I love those traps. And I truthfully, like with the reverse bear trap, I actually want to have one made. Not for the movie, but just simply because it's such a unique trap. And to like have it to just hang on the wall or something would be freaking awesome. But yes, Saw 2 is really, really good. I can't remember as much about it, though. I've got it on DVD, though, so I need to watch it again. Selena asks, when doing killing/screaming scenes, do you guys ever get nervous that outsiders might hear you and get concerned? Random question I had for a while. That's actually a really good question.
So for me, hold on. First horror film. So I haven't really run into this yet, where there's screaming and really intense scenes. But yeah, I imagine it depends on the location where you're filming, how remote it is. Yeah, you definitely don't want to alarm people. You don't want the cops being called because they feel like somebody's in danger. Paul, I don't know if you can speak more to this than I can.
So, it is a good question, because it is something that I've thought of quite a bit, especially because I have done a couple of roles that required some killing and or screaming. So for myself, it depends on the location. If it's like outdoors, then that thought is kind of in the back of my mind, like, okay, I'm making a huge ruckus here. Is someone going to notice and call the cops or something and think that something is really happening? So one of the things that I do to kind of put that out of the back of my mind is I kind of make a game plan ahead of time, like assuming the worst and someone thinks that it's a real thing that's happening and they call the cops get dispatched and all that. Obviously, it'll be very easy for them to tell that it's for a project, it's not real. So that's one thing, but also that is a large part of why we go for like permits to do certain scenes in certain locations, because whenever you have a permit, my understanding, and I could be wrong, so if any filmmakers are on here that might know this answer better, definitely let me know. But a permit will kind of serve as like proof, and I do believe that the authorities would be alerted to that just so that they knew ahead of time. I actually had to look into that specifically for a scene. It was a kill scene, but it didn't involve any screaming. The scene is not going to be in the first harvest, unfortunately, because I couldn't pull it off in time. But we were going to have an explosion scene. And I had a location picked out, and I had the characters picked out that I wanted to be involved. And the way to do a scene like that is to get a permit, and B, you have to alert the authorities. and you also have to have a fire marshal. That's obviously on the extreme side, but yeah, I guess to more directly answer, it's I wouldn't say that it makes me nervous, but it does kind of go on the back of my mind a little bit. Like especially one of the scenes that we're filming. Oh gosh, I don't know if we've set a time to actually film the episode that has the chase scene in it. I don't believe we've actually set that date yet. But that one is one that comes to mind when thinking about kind of nerves about screaming and killing, because parts of it will take place outside, but at the same time, it's going to be on private property. So we shouldn't have any kind of outside interference unless we just scream really loud. You never know. But yeah, it's not something that should really weigh on you too much, because even if the worst happens and someone calls the cops, all you have to do is like show proof that you're not actually killing someone and you'll be fine. The most that they would do is either shut down filming or just tell you to wrap it up soon. That's the most I can imagine happening, at least. Especially if you have a permit to film, then you won't have any issues with that whatsoever. That was a very long-winded answer. I apologize. Travis Pittman says he wants to be in a movie. Well, we might be able to make that happen. Travis is a wrestler known as Big Country, and he is one of the few people that can actually match me as far as size goes and physicality. So that would actually be quite interesting to see a fight scene between Jay Sullivan and Big Country. We might have to do that. We may have to do that. I'm reading back just to make sure that we covered all the questions. I'm pretty sure that we did. Austin, can you clarify what you mean? You can definitely message me about this show. It was definitely it was on the interesting side, that's for sure. There was some stuff that happened that really shouldn't have, and there were some very heated moments that didn't need to happen, and so that's all that I want to say on that. But yeah, you can definitely message me and say about why you weren't at the show. Yep, I think we're caught up on questions. So kind of going back to horror talk, because if anyone cannot tell, I'm a huge horror fan. So in preparing for the Emily role, what are some characters that you have kind of studied to mentally prepare for such a role?
Yeah, so probably one of my favorite recent performances in a horror film from a female, if you've seen Hereditary,
Yep.
Toni Collette's performance in that movie is incredible. Her character is very different from Emily, but she has a lot of conflicting feelings and emotions as well. And I'm thinking of a particular scene in the movie that happens at the dinner table. I don't want to spoil for everyone, but if you haven't seen Hereditary, watch it and pay attention to this scene in particular. But it's one that I've returned to a few times just because I think it's so important to capture and understand that kind of conflict that people can feel toward other people that they love. So for me, that's kind of what I've been leaning into so far is trying to think my way through this role and to prepare for it. because Emily will have a very emotional scene as well in the movie, which I won't spoil. But yeah, I would say Toni Collette's performance in Hereditary.
Hereditary is such a good movie. I remember back when it first came out, amongst my friend circle, there was some controversy with it. I don't really know why, because it's a horror movie. Horror movie definitely bends boundaries, so it's nothing new by any means. But I remember how impactful it was, and I always love when a horror movie doesn't solely rely on gore. I mean, there was some, right? But it didn't rely on that to tell the story.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I love gore. I'm all for it, but to have a movie that doesn't need it throughout the entire movie is so cool. And they pulled it off so well. I'm trying to think, there's another movie that came out the same year, and it was similar in terms of not relying on gore, but I can't think of what it was called.
Do you remember what it's about? Was it another like A24 film? Because they seem really good at that.
It may have been.
Or
I have to look into it. It was it may not have been the same year. The Babadook.
Oh, Babadook, yeah. Yeah, I think that
I don't think it was the same year.
It was close, I feel like. But yeah, the Babadook is really, really good.
I really loved that they referenced those movies in the new Scream movie, because I feel like that they haven't gotten enough love from the horror community, especially like with the relatively new phrase of elevated horror. I feel like it's not as understood quite yet, and so I personally am all for it, and I think that they pulled it off so good. Austin says he has a question. Is it wrestling related or movie related? Either way, you can ask in the comments, brother. I feel like that parts of the first Harvest are definitely elevated horror, because even though there are going to be some very intense and gory scenes, those scenes, as impactful as they are not going to overwhelm the rest of the movie. A lot of it is definitely going to be more focused on the emotional aspects. I don't think I actually sent you the kill scenes. Part of that is because I'm going to improvise my lines during those scenes. But yes, I feel like that horror movies shouldn't always have to rely on gore. Even slashers. And I feel like the new Scream movie did relatively good with that. It's definitely too bloody to be elevated horror, but I can't give enough love to the new Scream movie either, honestly. And part of the reason that I include some Scream Easter eggs is because of how good the new Scream movie was. Have you seen the new Scream?
I have not, and I am upset that I haven't seen it yet. So it is on my to-do list for sure.
It's on Paramount Plus. I definitely recommend it. And as far as like one of the Easter eggs goes, there is a direct connection, actually. I'm not going to spoil that specifically, but there's a connection between Jay Sullivan and Scream. So I'm very excited to kind of go into that a little bit. It's more of a minor detail that doesn't have a whole lot of relevance to the story, but that scene will unfold very early on. There are some connections with the Emily character and Friday the 13th. So I'm excited to explore that. I'm really excited to kind of explore the different characters and see it unfold. But in that regard, I feel like there was something else I was going to cover and I cannot think of it. That train has left the station. I'm drawing a blank. I'm totally drawing a blank. I am so sorry about that. I'm kind of waiting to see if Austin asks his question.
My phone is about to die.
Oh,
so
no.
I'm trying to get it plugged in to charge, but originally I was not going to be joining from my car, but I apologize that I have background noise and all that going on, and I will stay on until my phone dies.
Absolutely. I have no idea what my phone's at even. I should be good. So you said this is your first horror movie that you're actually in.
Yes.
So I'm kind of curious, like, are you going to try to get into more horror movies? Is that something you want to do? Or just kind of, I don't know. Oh my gosh, I'm drawing so many blanks right now. Are you trying to do more horror movies?
I would love to do more horror movies. I love this genre so much. When I saw the casting call for The First Harvest, I was like, oh my gosh, yes. You know, I'm still relatively new to the acting scene, but this was really the first opportunity that I saw to do a local, you know, indie horror film. So I was 100% on board, and I would love to do as many of them as I can, just because the genre means so much to me. Absolutely. I'll do as many as I can. So if anybody has projects coming up, let me know.
And of the horror franchises that you mentioned being amongst your favorites, is there one that, I feel like I already know the answer to this, is there one that you would actually see yourself being in?
Ooh. I would love to be in a Saw movie. I think the puzzles, the you know, traps, everything, it's so fascinating to me. So to be in a Saw movie or, you know, even a Halloween movie would be so cool. So cool. And when we look back at the original Halloween and Jamie Lee Curtis and her performance in that and sort of how her career just launched after it, I mean, it's the coolest.
Absolutely. I feel like that I would probably do well in a Saw movie because I'm decent at solving puzzles. So I definitely agree with that answer, honestly. I would not do good in a Halloween movie because the first time I see Michael Myers, I'm done. It's not that I'm afraid of the character necessarily, so much as it is that somehow, some way, no matter how fast someone runs, that guy catches up with them. So I feel like that in that situation, I would almost just kind of like lay down and say, all right, I'm done. Although if I had an opportunity to be in a Halloween movie, I would absolutely jump at the chance. Ironically, one of the actors who's in the short series and part of The First Harvest actually played Michael Myers in a fan film.
Oh, fun.
And so we've kind of had an idea to do a crossover film, or at least a crossover fight between Jay Sullivan and Michael Myers. And that would be so cool. Even though it would just be a fan project, it would be so cool to do. And then I believe that we also are going to plan a Scream versus Harvester as well. It has been talked about, and there have been some people involved who said that they wanted to actually do it. So we will see. You could see Emily team up with Sydney. That would actually be really cool
amazing.
if I could get Nev Campbell to do that. Oh my gosh, that would be insane. Probably well over my budget, but that's okay. I'll go into debt for that. I saw another comment come up, but now I can't find it. I actually have another question myself. So, whenever I sent you the audition notes for the Emily character, you did the audition so good. And, like, I have a knack for being able to pick up who's going to be good for what role. And even whenever we were just talking to each other the first time on the phone, I had a feeling that you would end up being really good in the Emily role. And then I was right. So I'm curious as to like what steps you took, because that was one of the emotional scenes, and I did that specifically to see how you would do in that specific scene. So what are some of the things you did to kind of prepare for that?
Yeah.
Because it looked as if it was playing out in the movie in a way, and I was like, holy crap.
So for me, when I'm doing something like that, and when I did the audition, you gave me some freedom to add in some lines and to kind of take the scene in whatever direction felt natural. So that I think really helped, was being able to, I had background information about the character, and then being able to be in the moment and kind of feel the moment and just let the lines come out naturally. Like that is, so when I'm acting, I think the best advice I've ever gotten is, do the background work, do the script analysis, break down the character, do everything you can to understand them. But once you've done that, let go and be in the moment and actually feel those feelings. Don't be thinking in your head, okay, right now I should be sad. Feel it. And for me, that's what I did when I took a look at the lines, when I thought my way through of how, she might actually speak in that moment. I felt it. And I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It's a really special moment, I feel like, in acting, when you can just feel that in sync with a character. I think the way you wrote Emily and the information you gave me about Emily's background helped to get to that point where I could just pour myself into it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I said, it was more of a struggle to write the Emily character, because I knew that it had to be done a certain way. And you definitely nailed exactly what I was going for, especially with that part with the emotion. And so like that's definitely something I was curious about, was kind of the steps to get into that mindset. And that's like one of the things for me too with the Jay Sullivan character, especially because he kind of has the multiple personality deal going on. So it's almost trying to step into multiple mindsets at the same time, which is super fun. But like to actually do it, you hit the nail on the head about feeling the emotions and feeling the character. I feel like that was a little bit easier to do with Jay whenever he was himself, as opposed to him being in the harvester persona or personality, whatever you would call it. So to see the Emily and Jay characters interact is going to be so cool, both as himself and as the harvester. I literally cannot wait to jump into that. And I'm going to put a link in the comments now for everybody. I know that I had said originally this was going to be to promote the Indiegogo link, and then I totally have forgotten to actually promote the Indiegogo link. So I'm going to do that real quick. I'm going to put that in the comments. So if anyone watching wants to be a part of the movie and support the cause, so to speak, the Indiegogo link is the best way to do that. All the money will go directly into the actors' hands, so I'm not actually going to get any of that for myself. I just want to be able to add to everyone's pay and add to the SFX budget. So rather you do the cheapest perk or the most expensive perk, either way is so appreciated. And as far as the perks go, there are DVDs, posters, props from the movie. There are like 6 or 7 prop knives that we're going to throw in there. The mask, one of the masks I'm going to wear, spoiler, one of the masks I'm going to wear is going to be in there as well. And that will be signed by myself and the gentleman who makes it, who is named Tim Cecil, a good buddy of mine who is excellent at prop and mask making. And then every package is going to have an extra as well. So bear that in mind. But I went ahead and put that in the comments. So if anyone wants to check that out, it is right there for you. Oh, goodness. So I kind of want to wrap back to Chasing Rabbits before we close out for the evening. I feel like that there were aspects of the Jane character that almost kind of tie into the Emily character a little bit. Maybe I'm just imagining that. But I kind of feel like that there are, especially maybe the line delivery. I feel like that as far as the personality goes, they're very similar. And I wanted to go back to that specifically because earlier, whenever you had started talking about Jane, the audio cut out for at least a minute and a half. So before we wrap up, could you maybe talk more about the Jane character for those who didn't get to hear it earlier?
Sure. So Jane is the best friend of the main character, Penny. She is the comedic relief in the film. Anything that comes to her mind, she says it. And she's completely 100% herself all of the time. What I love about Jane, though, is that she's really fiercely loyal to Penny, and she will stop at nothing to protect her friend. So, yeah, I think Jane is at her best when she is just speaking her mind, and she has some really funny lines in the film.
Absolutely. And I don't think that Emily has any funny lines, but nevertheless, I'm not going to spoil any of the dialogue. There are definitely some moments that I'm very eager to see play out. As far as the release date goes, we're going to shoot for October 13th of next year, which is ironically Friday the 13th. I didn't plan it that way. But I've wanted to release a horror movie on Friday the 13th because the irony of it, but that is the planned release date for the first harvest. That could change. It could be moved up. It could be moved back. Hopefully it's not moved back. But the release date for season 2 is tentatively October 14th. That one is probably a little bit more loose. It may be pushed back just a hair depending on the filming schedule for it, because we're kind of filming it back to back with the first harvest. So we're going to see as far as that goes, but that is the plan, is to release it on October 14th, which is ironic because Halloween is releasing on that day, the new Halloween movie. So again, that is not something I planned. But nevertheless, that's really cool. So people can watch season 2 and then go to Halloween. So yes, very excited. And Holly, I am beyond excited to work with you. Ever since I got in your audition tape and knew that I was going to cast you in that role, I've been super excited to work with you and everybody else on the cast. I know that I've not announced everyone quite yet, but there are some people that have probably been on some notable movies, some people we've worked with bigger names. So I'm excited to get everyone together, whether they are new actors or people who've been in for a while. I can't wait to work with everyone, and especially the aspect of elevating the cast. And again, like I said earlier, that's why I'm doing this. You know, it's not purely just for me, even though it is to put my story out there. I'm just excited to work with everyone and get everybody kind of on the map, and especially with you, Holly, wanting to do more horror. I hope that this will kind of open that door, especially going forward with the Saw aspects in the sequel. I'm not going to spoil too much of that, but there are going to be a lot of Saw aspects in the sequel. But that being said, do you have anything else that you would like to say or include before we close?
I just thank you for having me on, and I'm so looking forward to working with you and everyone else. If anybody has any questions in general, I know we were getting some questions about acting, things like that. Feel free to reach out to me directly. Send me a message on Messenger. I'm totally happy to answer any questions, or if you just want to run something by me, that's cool. Don't hesitate to reach out.
Absolutely. Holly, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today and join the live stream. I know it took us a minute to get it going, and I'm so sorry about that, but I'm really glad we got to have this chat, and I hope that everybody is as excited about Season 2 and The First Harvest as I am. Again, to see this story come to life after literally 2 years of planning is surreal. So I hope everybody has a wonderful day, and we'll definitely do some more live streams with various cast members going forward. The live stream is going to be a regular thing. So I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Be safe out there. Be good to yourselves and each other.